The night had fallen, casting an eerie and unsettling atmosphere over the land. A heavy, oppressive feeling hung in the air, as if something dreadful was about to happen. The once serene and silent surroundings were now bustling with countless guests who had already arrived, their faces tense with anticipation and concealed fear. They were all gathered for one purpose: to bring an end to the great demonic cult, an organization long reviled for its cruel and merciless actions. At the forefront stood Kang Hwangyum, the master and leader of the Jongnam faction. A man known for his unwavering resolve and deep sense of justice, Hwangyum surveyed the scene with a grim expression. The many martial factions of the world, long divided by pride and old grievances, had finally united. The threat posed by the demonic cult was too grave to ignore. He called out boldly, his voice carrying over the tense silence, addressing the enemy that lurked behind the heavy closed doors. He spoke of the demonic cult's ignorance and arrogance, how they had looked down upon the old factions for too long, believing themselves to be invincible. But now, the time had come for them to pay the price for their atrocities. Among those within the cult was one figure of particular infamy, the one known as the reincarnation of the heavenly demon, a man named Guqian, who was destined to become the next leader of the cult. Hwangyum vowed to put an end to Guqian and all the evil deeds committed in his name. From within, an insolent voice rang out, filled with scorn and contempt. Wang Geon, a defiant and reckless figure, taunted the gathered forces, mocking them as senile old men. His words dripped with arrogance as he declared his intent to wipe them all out, deeming them unbelievably arrogant and outdated. Hwangyum, his face contorted with fury at the insult, could barely restrain himself. He called for the doors to be opened, demanding that the heavenly demon face him. A grin spread across the heavenly demon's face, twisted and mocking, as he called for his foes to enter, his amusement evident even as he ordered his puppets to tear apart those who dared to challenge him. And so, the battle began. The leaders of the various martial factions fought valiantly, clashing against the cultists in a desperate bid to eliminate the evil that had plagued their lands for so long. The metallic clash of swords filled the air, a sound so chilling it felt as though it could rip apart one's very soul. Fear seeped into the hearts of some, but Hwangyum urged them not to be afraid, reminding them that they had already accepted the death sentence when they chose to confront this evil. The conflict between Hwangyum and the heavenly demon was fierce and unrelenting. Blood sprayed through the air, staining Hwangyum's face and attire, yet his eyes burned with unquenchable rage. The presence of the heavenly demon, a creature spoken of only in legends, was like a dark storm descending upon them. His eyes, devoid of mercy, were consumed by shadow, and every movement he made radiated uncontainable fury. He struck down all who came before him with cruel efficiency, leaving nothing but blood and corpses in his wake. Mocking his enemies, the heavenly demon jeered at their attempt to kill him with what he considered insignificant forces. Covered in the blood of those he had slaughtered, he relished in their despair. Then, a man hidden among the crowd, his face obscured, spoke. He acknowledged that Guqian was indeed the reincarnation of the heavenly demon, and admitted that if Guqian had joined Jongnam instead, their faction might have mirrored the demonic cult's power. He confessed, however, that they had not come unprepared and vowed to claim Guqian's head. The heavenly demon, puzzled by the stranger's words, questioned his identity, declaring he had never seen such a person in the Central Plains. Wang Geon, too, demanded to know if he hailed from Shaolin, Wudang, or Jongnam, but the hidden man offered no answers. This blatant disregard only further fueled Wang Geon's fury. He called the man a disrespectful youth, mocking his attitude and warning that in his time, such arrogance would have been met with a beating. Tension thickened as both men burned with pure rage, their movements sharp and filled with venomous intent. The hooded man praised Wang Geon for his strength, but coldly informed him that his life would end here. Wang Geon scoffed at the threat, doubting someone of the man's stature could possibly defeat him. Yet in the next moment, something inexplicable occurred. The hooded man's movement was too fast, too subtle for Wang Geon to detect. It was then he realized that while he had been speaking so boldly, the stranger had already been moving against him. A stabbing pain hit him, and blood spilled as the hooded man struck his stomach with a lethal blow. Despite the tremendous pressure and the force of the attack, Wang Geon refused to fall. The sheer resilience in his spirit would not allow him to die so easily. Guqian, observing the scene, scoffed at the enemy's efforts. He declared that no one could possibly imagine what he had endured to reach his current position. His defiance echoed through the battlefield as the fight raged on, the ground becoming slick with blood as casualties on both sides mounted. As the chaos intensified, the master finally fell, leaving Guqian burdened with the memories of his childhood, teenage years, and the old man who had shaped his life. He was determined not to meet the same fate. Refusing to succumb, Guqian pleaded to whatever force might hear him, his voice desperate. Then faintly, he heard voices, noisy, unfamiliar, and crude. Someone was sitting beside him, persistently hitting him, attempting to wake him up. The noise cut through the fog in his mind, and slowly, he regained consciousness. He opened his eyes to a bizarre scene. Fear was evident on the faces of those around him, worried he might have died, but it wasn't a battlefield anymore. Instead, they seemed eager for round 2 of some kind of knockout game, aiming to score points on a punch machine. Guqian's mind reeled in confusion. He questioned silently who these people were and what strange situation he had landed in. It was a mission of sorts, meant to clean up trash, and a hidden reward awaited them at the end. Still disoriented, Guqian was forced upright by the unruly crowd. He was certain he had died at the hands of that mysterious attacker, and everything now felt like an absurd, incomprehensible dream. There was no other explanation for what was happening. One of the men claimed the first turn, his confidence apparent as he called Guqian a loser and ordered him to keep quiet. Using Guqian as a makeshift punching bag, the man began striking him with casual ease, counting off each blow and demanding to know what he had been doing until now. But the accumulated rage, confusion, and lingering defiance within Guqian finally reached a breaking point. Rising to his feet, he lashed out with all his might, his fist connecting with the man's face. His annoyance and fury were unmistakable, evident in his cold, narrowed eyes. The strange, twisted reality continued to unfold around him, yet one thing remained clear. Guqian was far from finished. Guqian stepped out, leaving the crowd around him in complete shock. Their eyes widened, and murmurs rippled through the space as everyone exchanged glances, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. To them, it seemed as though he had lost his mind. The look in his eyes, the way he carried himself, and the madness radiating off him made them question his sanity. Guqian himself was in a state of utter confusion, wondering what in the world was happening. His mind reeled, trying to figure out whether this bizarre situation unfolding before him was real or some cruel, disorienting trick being played on his senses. A sharp, unnatural pang shot through his chest, causing his heart to pound violently against his ribcage. His body trembled slightly as an ominous notification flickered before his eyes. Failure? Death. In that single instant, the realization hit him like a merciless blow. He was already dead. His breathing turned shallow, and his hands trembled as his mind tried to process the gravity of what had just been confirmed. Guqian's pulse raced faster, a shot of panic flooding his veins. Before he could steady himself, another strange notification materialized before his eyes. You have been possessed. The words struck him like a cold slap. Possessed? His thoughts scrambled. He immediately recalled an ancient technique employed by those vile bastards from the blood cult, a forbidden and sinister method he had only ever heard of in rumors and whispered conversations among those who had lived through the horrors of demonic arts. Who the hell was behind this now? Who had the audacity to pull such a stunt on him? The message continued to unfold, cold and unrelenting. He was now under orders to complete a first mission and ultimately fulfill a final mission. Upon completing these, he would be granted the ability to select a desired moment and return to his original body. As an added reward, he would be allowed to move to the 8th basement floor and acquire bonus experience points. Guqian's thoughts clashed between disbelief and a flicker of hope. Was this for real? Was this truly another chance at life and power? Or was this some twisted form of torture meant to drive him mad? He felt a surge of determination. Whether or not it was real, now wasn't the time to hesitate. The situation was dire, and everything around him, the unfamiliar location, the strange sensations in his body, the mess his internal energy, blood, and Kai were in, all pointed to this being far from an illusion. For now, whatever that bastard with the scroll had done to his body, Guqian decided to play along with the twisted game they had thrown him into. His gaze turned sharp as he raised his hand, curling his fingers in a commanding gesture, signaling towards a group of fellows nearby. His expression was cold, and his eyes burned with suppressed fury as he beckoned them closer. One of them, brimming with misplaced confidence, charged towards him at full speed, his fist ready to land a blow. But to Guqian, the man was moving far too slow, almost sluggishly in his eyes. Without wasting a second, Guqian delivered a powerful strike, one so fierce the man was sent flying backwards, his body hitting the ground with a harsh thud. A surge of satisfaction coursed through Guqian as he moved forward. One by one, he dismantled their bullying, cocky personalities, exacting his pent-up rage on those who had once dared to order him around as if he were some lowly servant. He had no patience left for any of them. He was pissed, no, enraged, over the humiliation and powerlessness they had made him endure. If any of them wanted to die, he was more than willing to oblige. The cold rage in Guchon's eyes made his intentions clear. As he dealt with each of them, one by one, another coward attempted to flee in terror. Guchon noticed the movement instantly, the fear etched onto the man's face, the desperate scramble to get away. But Guchon was faster. In a blur of motion, he caught him just as the timer ticked down to 5 seconds remaining. Without hesitation, he yanked him back, delivering a punishing blow, demanding to know where the coward thought he was going. The man crumpled to the ground like a discarded rag doll. With that final strike, the long-awaited system message appeared. Mission complete. Dispose of the trash, April 4th. As soon as those words hung in the air, a girl approached him, calling him by the name Gyojin. Guchon turned his gaze towards her, his expression unbothered and unreadable, though inwardly his thoughts churned in chaos. The girl, however, showed no signs of slowing down. She was persistent, bombarding him with questions, asking if he was okay, if that guy had been bullying him again, and why he hadn't spoken to her lately. She wondered aloud if it was just puberty messing with him, or if something else was wrong. Her words kept coming, a torrent of inquiries about his bruised and bloodied hand, her concern palpable. Before Guchon could even react properly, she was scooping up stones from the ground, threatening to pelt the guy who lay groaning in the dirt. The man weakly protested, swearing it hadn't been him, but the girl ignored his pleas. She turned back to Guchon with a smile and insisted they head to the nurse's office. Despite his resistance, she practically dragged him there, forcing him to sit down while she tended to his injuries, gently wrapping a bandage around his wounded hand. She left him with a firm reminder to call her if anything happened again, her voice soft but protective. Guchon sat upright, his thoughts spinning wildly as he tried to piece together the absurdity of his current reality. What the hell was going on? What was happening to his body? His internal energy felt like a shattered mess, his blood sluggish, and his ki unstable. Everything inside him was a wreck, a chaotic storm of broken power. Guchon pulled off the bandage the girl had just placed on his hand. Blood continued to ooze out stubbornly. He scowled, the sharp sting of pain a reminder of his weakened state. Annoyance flared within him. His body couldn't even withstand this much. Wasn't he Gucheon, the supreme figure of the demonic cult, the reincarnation of the heavenly demon? How had he fallen so low, trapped in a frail, ordinary body incapable of handling even this minor level of damage? His rage simmered quietly beneath the surface. One thing was certain, whatever this twisted world was, and whoever these people thought they were, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The memory came to Guchon suddenly. A moment from his past, back in a world far removed from where he now found himself. The sun had been dipping behind the mountains, painting the sky in hues of crimson and deep amber, when his master had summoned him to the fort's ramparts. The air had been heavy with the scent of evening dew and iron, a chill beginning to creep into the stones beneath their feet. Guchon had stood before his master, puzzled at the unexpected call. His master, a man whose presence commanded even the winds to still, had gazed distantly into the horizon before speaking. He had reminded Guchon of the man they'd captured earlier, a strange fellow with odd claims that made little sense. At the time, Guchon had dismissed the man as a low-life thug, one unworthy of much thought, but the master had elaborated, revealing that this man claimed he wasn't from their world at all. The absurdity of it had made Guchon scoff back then. Who spoke of other worlds with a straight face? It had seemed laughable, the ramblings of a deranged fool. But his master, cautious and wise, had advised against treating such things lightly, urging Guchon to consider the possibility before brushing it aside. Now, seated atop the rooftop of an unfamiliar school building, in a world far from the one he knew, Guchon cursed himself for not asking more questions. The strangeness of his situation gnawed at him. This place, this body, none of it felt like his own. The internal energy within him was pitifully weak, his blood and ki scattered and in disarray. What an insult to the name of Gucheon, once a formidable force within the supreme demon cult. He could hardly believe he was reduced to this state, lying in the grass of a mundane modern school, riddled with questions he could barely begin to answer. Then came the memory of the reward. The promise had been clear, a reward for completing the cleanup mission. Guchon impatiently demanded its arrival, mentally berating whatever presence governed this place for the delay. And then it came. A message declared the mission successful, and the reward was being processed. He felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation, a wave of pleasant fragrance rising from within this foreign body. He tensed, irritated at the underwhelming nature of it. A fragrance? Was this a joke? His fury rising, he shouted into the empty space, demanding the one responsible to show themselves. The silence was unbearable. Before long, a voice pierced his thoughts. A girl's sharp, unimpressed tone called out, irritated by the noise he was making. She questioned his behavior, remarking on how strange he seemed compared to his usual self. She noticed his distracted state, his distant eyes, and the odd aura he exuded. To her, Guchen seemed different, perhaps sick, or worse, mad. He noted her words but barely reacted, his mind still caught in the tangle of the unknown. The girl, unconcerned by his lack of engagement, muttered about being ignored and how people tended to avoid her. Guchen barely acknowledged her presence, preoccupied with his own growing frustration. Suddenly, a loud commotion drew their attention as the door to the rooftop slammed open. The same group of thugs from before stormed in, anger painted across their faces. They shouted insults, calling Guqian a loser, accusing him of finally showing his face. Guqian, unbothered, faced them with cold indifference. He inquired which of them was the leader. The biggest of the bunch stepped forward, throwing a punch with full force. Guqian, despite his weakened state, raised his arm to shield himself. His body hadn't recovered, and the strain was immense, but the fire in his eyes never wavered. The scuffle broke out again, fists flying, curses shouted. The girl, worried and distressed, pleaded for them to stop, warning Guqian that this place wasn't safe. In the chaos, the large thug turned to flee, but in the confusion, the girl lost her footing and tumbled over the edge of the rooftop. A sharp cry cut through the air as everyone realized in horror. This was the 5th floor. Panic ensued. One of the thugs shouted in disbelief, cursing their luck and wondering what would happen to her. Another, wide-eyed and shaking, asked what they were supposed to do now. The big guy barked for them to flee, insisting they were never there. The group scattered in terror. Guchun for a brief moment assessed the situation calmly. He remarked internally that the fall wouldn't kill her. Perhaps a few broken bones, nothing more. The others, horrified at his detached reasoning, could barely comprehend his state of mind. Then it appeared, another notification, an emergency quest demanding he save the girl who fell because of him, the reward a mystery. Guchun scoffed at the absurdity of it. How was this his fault? Yet before another thought could form, he leaped off the edge. The watching thugs gasped in shock, one yelling in disbelief at Guchun's insanity. But Guchun's mind was set. He caught the falling girl mid-air, breaking her descent, and landed with precision, his weakened body straining against the effort but holding firm. The girl, dazed and disoriented, managed to speak, calling him a loser. Guchun, unconcerned with the insult, checked if she was unharmed, noting her racing heartbeat and pale face. He asked rhetorically if she was scared, receiving a confused and startled glare in return. Still, she was alive, and that was enough for now. Above, the remaining thugs scrambled, unsure of their next move. The leader cursed again, commanding them to retreat, warning against getting involved further. As they disappeared, Guchun's body surged with a sudden electric rush. He felt it. A change, a surge of dormant power. The leader, seeing him still standing, stared in disbelief, swearing he had seen Gucheon fall. Gucheon, smirking darkly, felt the satisfaction of the reward claimed. The emergency quest was complete. The reward, latent power awakened within his body, a temporary reprieve from his weakened state. He could now access his original abilities for a fleeting 10 seconds, with a cooldown of 24 hours. He acknowledged it grimly. 10 seconds was enough for now. All he had to do was survive until the next opening, and piece together the madness of this unfamiliar world, one shattered fragment at a time. Guchon had the boys pinned down, one beneath him while forcing the others to kneel. Their faces dripped with sweat, terrified by the sudden change in this person they once knew, as nothing more than a pushover. Guchun's face twisted in frustration as he mulled over the situation, trying to grasp how, in this strange new world, he could be perceived as weak. The boy beneath him trembled as he admitted in a stammering voice that, to put it bluntly, Guchun had always been a weakling, a pushover, a total loser. But now things were different. Now he was no pathetic trash. He was no longer a nobody. "My lord," the boy added, hoping to appease Guchun's growing anger. But Guchun wasn't satisfied. He smacked the boy's head lightly, annoyed by the ridiculous turn of events and the absurdity of this new world. In his thoughts, Guchun reaffirmed that he had, even if for just a brief moment, managed to use his original power. It wasn't something that anyone else could imitate. The sensation was unmistakable. That power belonged to him alone. Unique, fierce, and undeniable. And if he could access it here, even in fragments, then perhaps the idea of returning home wasn't just a hopeless fantasy after all. The trickster who brought him here, whoever or whatever it was, must be hiding something. Guchen vowed to uncover it. As he surveyed the world around him, his unease only grew. The women here dressed in strange, revealing clothes, and the men's hair was styled in baffling ways. Everything seemed unnatural and alien. His thoughts wandered as he noticed a group of students in the corner whispering and casting curious glances his way. He wondered if something was on his face. One of the boys beneath him managed a nervous laugh and suggested it might be because Guchen was literally riding them like mounts in the middle of the school. Guchen didn't see the issue. If anything, he found it amusing that these people were willing to carry him around. Were the others nearby secretly hoping to carry him too? The thought amused him, though it drew awkward, forced laughter from the others. Soon enough, Guchon's stomach growled in protest. The internal energy he used earlier and the stress of the situation had left him ravenous. With sudden excitement, he declared it was time to head to the cafeteria. Without much thought, he dragged the trembling boys along with him, unintentionally bruising and hurting them as they hurried to keep up. Inside the cafeteria, Guchen attacked the food with ferocity. He piled his plate high and devoured everything in sight with such speed and hunger that those nearby couldn't help but stare. The big guy sitting with him commented in awe about how intensely Guchen was eating. Guchen responded mid-bite, praising the quality of the food. Another boy eagerly agreed, noting how the school's food was always top-notch. Guchen, still devouring his meal, casually asked if the others weren't going to eat. They quickly responded that, of course they were. Guchen urged them to eat up too, but his attention was entirely consumed by the food in front of him. Meanwhile, someone had been watching the strange scene unfold from a distance. A group of bullies, led by a tough-looking student named Sangu, approached. Sangu's presence sent a wave of tension through the cafeteria. The big guy immediately recognized him and thought to himself that they were utterly screwed now. Despite the looming danger, Guchen remained focused on his meal, unbothered by the murmurs around him. Sangu stepped forward with a mocking grin, declaring that the rumors were true. These idiots had really carried Guchen around the school like a king. The boys, caught between fear and embarrassment, laughed awkwardly. One of them nervously admitted it was sort of true. The bullies burst into mocking laughter at the absurdity. Sangu, in a tone thick with sarcasm, suggested they should let him have a ride too. Why not? He might as well get himself a luxury ride like a Lamborghini while they were at it. Guchen, pausing for a moment to process the unfamiliar word, muttered it aloud. Lambo? Confused by its meaning. Sangu's mocking tone quickly turned commanding as he ordered Guchen to get up and follow him to the roof immediately. He didn't wait for a response, walking off with an air of dominance, fully expecting Guchen to follow like a beaten dog. The bullies sneered, watching the exchange. Guchen sighed heavily, irritation rising in his chest. Even a dog gets to eat in peace, you know, he muttered, shoveling another bite of food into his mouth. The bullies were dumbfounded by his casual defiance. Was this psycho not grasping the situation he was in? Sangu paused, considering whether to simply beat Guchen to death right there in the cafeteria. Guchen sensed the growing tension and sneered. Turning to the boys who had been forced to carry him earlier, he coldly congratulated them. They looked at him in confusion, and one asked what he meant. Gucheon's eyes darkened with a dangerous glint. He informed them that they were about to be kicked out, because a new ride had just appeared on the scene. The rage smoldered behind Gucheon's gaze, daring anyone to challenge him now. Both groups now stood face to face on the rooftop, the air thick with tension, as if the entire school was holding its breath. The atmosphere had shifted into something heavier, a confrontation neither side could back down from now. Sangu's crew, infamous across the school for their ruthless control, faced off against Gucheon and his group of newly loyal followers. Every person in the vicinity could feel it. This was no ordinary schoolyard scuffle. The bullies sneered, mocking their opponents with words laced in false bravado. One jeered, asking if Guchen's crew had eaten something strange today to have the nerve to pick this fight. Another scoffed, declaring the sight of them was downright embarrassing. Gucheon, unimpressed by their petty taunts, cast a glare at them, his presence alone making some of them instinctively step back. He didn't even bother dignifying their nonsense with a response. Sangu, slightly annoyed, called out one of his own. He mocked his companion for not noticing how Gucheon had practically inhaled his food earlier. To him, it was ridiculous that anyone could still be underestimating this guy. One of Gucheon's own crew members, still hesitant, leaned in, trying to reason with him. Despite their faith in Gucheon, Even they admitted that Sangu's crew wasn't just a group of wannabe delinquents like themselves. These were the real top dogs of the school, even backed by older students who'd graduated but still pulled strings. But Gucheon didn't care for their caution. It wasn't these petty punks he was interested in testing. If his instincts were right, something else had to be here. The atmosphere felt off, and he called out for it to show itself. In that moment, as though summoned by his will, a quest notification materialized in front of him, invisible to everyone else. It read, "Clean up the trash and receive the universal healing herb. Failure will result in death." A grin spread across Gucheon's face, the thrill of a new challenge electrifying his blood. This was what he'd been waiting for. Ready and eager, he murmured to himself about maybe trying to tame a new ride after this. As if on cue, the weather darkened, an ominous gloom creeping over the rooftop. Sangu's crew exchanged uneasy glances, puzzled by the sudden shift in the air. They couldn't explain why Gucheon's steady approach felt so heavy, as though gravity itself thickened around them. One of the bullies, trying to shake off the growing sense of dread, boasted about his recent boxing training, claiming he could barely handle himself, let alone Gucheon. He taunted him, telling him to quit the tough act while he still had the chance. Yet, despite the words, something about Gucheon's unreadable expression and unrelenting advance left the guy faltering. Gucheon, however, felt something unfamiliar as well. An odd tension buzzed in his gut. In a split second, a memory flashed before him. It was his master, the one person he could never forget. The old man had once rapped him on the head during training, calling him a pathetic punk. At the time, Gucheon had protested, clueless about what he'd done wrong. His master, annoyed, gave him a final lesson, one that was now searing its way back into his mind. The foundation of offense and defense is footwork. Most martial artists only use footwork for dodging or adjusting distance, but true masters use it to restrict their opponent's movements and seize the best point of attack. If you don't know this, you're nothing. The rooftop snapped back into focus, both sides tensed, fists clenched, eyes burning with the need to settle this by force. Gucheon, standing firm, studied them with sharp disdain. They didn't even have the basics down. It wasn't even worth dealing with them one at a time. His lips curved into a smirk as he challenged them to rush him all at once. The bullies, momentarily stunned by his audacity, then exploded in rage and charged. Screaming, they aimed to crush him under sheer numbers. Gucheon, however, darted straight through their chaotic charge, closing in on Sangu in an instant. Fear cracked through Sangu's mask of arrogance. His heart hammered as he questioned aloud what kind of monster Gucheon truly was. Gucheon didn't even hesitate. An evil grin stretched across his face as he proclaimed his name, not the one known in this world, but his true identity as a member of the supreme demonic cult. His fists struck like lightning, sending Sangu flying, and the fight descended into madness. Fists flew, bodies were slammed, and the bullies quickly realized they'd stepped into something far beyond their league. Gucheon fought like a predator among prey, knocking them aside with brutal efficiency. Sangu's face was driven into the rooftop, blood smearing the ground as he gasped for breath. Victorious, Gucheon leaned over, his wicked grin unbroken. With a flourish, he checked the quest notification again. The reward had been granted. He reached out and retrieved the universal healing herb, examining it with interest. It was better than he'd expected. This thing would come in handy. Grabbing Sangu by the collar, Gucheon pulled him up like dead weight. He scoffed at him, saying it was pathetic how weak he was. He hadn't even needed to use martial arts against these nobodies. The defeated bullies lay groaning across the rooftop, and the rumors had already begun to spread like wildfire. Now, with a second ride at his disposal, Gucheon made his next move. He leaned into one of his lackeys and asked about something far more important to him. He wanted information about the demonic cult. The lackey gawked, confused by the unfamiliar term. Gucheon, impatient, smacked him for good measure, telling him to walk properly if he didn't want to die. He began listing off ancient sects from his world: demonic cult, Zhongnan, Wudong, Shaolin, Huashan, wondering what else existed in this bizarre modern place. His follower, face pale, stammered under the pressure, asking what exactly he was looking for. Then, like a spark firing in the mind, a name slipped out of the lackey's mouth: Zhongnan's greatest sword. Gucheon's eyes widened at those words. Instantly alert, he demanded a repeat. The world might be different, but perhaps some traces of his past still lingered here. Gucheon sat lazily in his classroom, legs casually thrown over the desk, radiating the kind of arrogance only someone like him could pull off. The air was heavy with boredom until finally, the third bell rang, and Gucheon's sharp gaze narrowed. According to what that trembling guy had told him earlier, after the third bell, he was supposed to encounter someone important. Jongnan's greatest sword. He scanned the room with precision, eyes locking on one particular figure. It was Park Jongnam, their uptight, perpetually nagging teacher, the one currently lecturing the class with his usual grumpy tone. "Hurry up and open your books if you don't want to die," he barked, smacking a book on the desk to emphasize his words. Gucheon's eyes glinted with rising irritation. So this was the so-called Jongnan's greatest sword? Rage brewed in his chest like a storm cloud. He clenched his fists under the table, his thoughts filled with contempt. "I knew it would be like this," he scoffed internally. "Greatest sword. My ass. That bastard's finished." Meanwhile, in another classroom, the snitch who had given Gucheon this lead was feeling completely at ease, unaware of the storm about to unfold. Gucheon sighed. What was I even expecting, he wondered. If there was another martial artist like me in this world, there's no way I wouldn't have sensed their ki. What do these freaks even want from me? At that moment, Gucheon felt a flicker, the sharp pulse of an ambush coming his way. His body reacted instinctively as a tiny dart cut through the air towards him. His ki flared violently in response, his senses honed and precise. He whipped his head towards the source. "Who the hell did that?" he growled internally. Park Jongnam's sharp voice cut through the moment. "Is that guy crazy or what?" he muttered aloud, glaring at Gucheon. "Hey, you! Come up to the front!" Gucheon's mind raced. Was it him? But then again, this teacher couldn't even catch a weak, insignificant dart like that. Disgusted, he blamed his body for its sluggishness. Ugh, this damn body. Park Jongnam wasn't having it. "Are you sick or something? Didn't you hear me? Get to the front now," he snapped. Gucheon's patience was hanging by a thread. Both their gazes met, an unspoken battle of wills crackling in the air between them. Jongnam, feeling strangely bothered by this student's defiance, approached with his stick raised, attempting to block Gucheon's path. "What are you doing? And where do you think you're going before class is even over?" he scolded, falling back into his usual old-school teacher mode. Kids these days, honestly, no respect for their teachers. "Che, nag, nag, nag." Gucheon seethed inside. Jongnan's greatest sword. My ass. What kind of pushover is this? Those words were spoken aloud, perhaps louder than intended, and Jongnam's expression changed in an instant. "What?" he snapped. "Where did you hear that?" Gucheon wasn't impressed. "What? About you being a pushover, or about Jongnan's greatest sword?" The tension in the room shifted. Park Jongnam's voice lowered. "Everyone, do some self-study. You," he pointed at Gucheon, "come quietly with me." Moments later, they were both on the rooftop. The wind picked up slightly, tugging at the edges of their uniforms. Jongnam stood a little distance away, his face twisted in confusion and hostility. "Hey you," he said. Gucheon muttered to himself, annoyed. "Why is it always me? Why do they always drag me out for this crap?" "Damn it." Jongnam's tone grew serious. "Are you from Jongnan?" Gucheon feigned ignorance. "What Jongnan? Why would Jongnan send me?" Jongnam's face contorted. This wasn't going the way he'd expected. He felt his authority slipping away in the face of Gucheon's absolute nonchalance. "Then what the hell is this? You've been talking down to me this whole time. You want to get yourself into real trouble?" Gucheon sighed again, not even attempting to mask his disdain. What is this idiot even saying now? "Answer me," Jongnam demanded, his frustration boiling over. "Answer! Answer!" For a moment, the rooftop filled with the bizarre sound of both of them bursting into laughter. It started awkwardly, then grew into an eerie, mutual cackle. "Ah-ha, ha-ha-ha! Ke-ke-ke-ke-ke! Eh-he-he-he-he-he! Ha-ha-ha-ha-ha!" It was strange and uncomfortable, like the calm before a storm. Jongnam wiped his eyes, chuckling. "You still need to study, so I'll spare your head," he said, raising his stick, intending to give Gucheon a good knock as punishment. But Gucheon moved. In an instant, his hand shot out and seized the stick mid-swing. His grip was so firm, his presence so overpowering, that Jongnam couldn't move it an inch. The strength radiating from Gucheon wasn't normal. Not for a teenager. Not for anyone Jongnam had encountered in years. A bead of sweat rolled down Jongnam's temple. Huh? And then, a flash. Gucheon flipped him over effortlessly, slamming him down before the teacher even realized what was happening. In that brief moment of impact, Jongnam's mind reeled. Crap. I reacted without thinking. Damn it, what am I doing to a normal student? But then it hit him. Wait, there's no way. This strength, this chi, this presence, another one like me. His blood ran cold. Gucheon stood over him, a smirk playing on his lips, the air thick with unspoken realization. There, under the blue sky on the desolate rooftop, It was clear, this wasn't over yet. The clash between Gu Cheon and Park Jongnam raged on the rooftop, the air thick with tension and unspoken questions. Gu Cheon felt the familiar frustration brewing within him, cursing his current weak and rotten body. Once again, his strikes failed to land cleanly, and though his instincts screamed at him to obliterate his opponent's face, something felt off. He barely managed to hold his stance, the strain evident as his body betrayed his intentions. Across from him, Park Jongnam's face was a mixture of confusion and disbelief. His eyes scanned Guchin's every move with suspicion, trying to decipher the enigma that stood before him. In his mind, Jongnam reeled at what he had just witnessed. That kid, Gyojin, had displayed traces of martial arts, something Jongnam never anticipated from a seemingly ordinary student. The revelation was enough to send shockwaves through him. Not only had the boy almost tapped into martial prowess, but he did so without an ounce of caution, utterly unafraid of consequences. Was he truly oblivious to the lurking threat of the shadow assassin, or had he been hiding his true nature all this time, playing the part of a quiet student while secretly mastering lethal skills? Jongnam shook his head, trying to make sense of the insanity. Was Guchin some kind of sickly kid on the verge of a breakdown? What was even happening here? Guchin, ever the provocateur, smirked at Jongnam's baffled expression, silently goading him. The insult of being called a pushover repeatedly gnawed at Jongnam's pride. It became clear to him that Guchin had been ridiculing him this entire time, speaking down without an ounce of respect. The frustration was mounting. Should he just end this now? The thought flickered through Jongnam's head like a dangerous spark, but caution restrained him. No, he needed confirmation first. Even as a teacher, it shocked Jongnam to witness this raw, reckless display of martial ability from someone like Gu Cheon. To wield such skills so carelessly, without regard for the consequences, was dangerous. Gu Cheon, however, remained unbothered by Jongnam's lecture, mocking the older man's concern. The real danger, Gu Cheon thought to himself, wasn't his behavior. It was Jongnam's misfortune at crossing paths with him. The rooftop standoff escalated further, the distance between them shrinking, each daring the other to make the first decisive move. Guchun's eyes gleamed with amusement, the tension between them now palpable. He was eager to see for himself whether this man, hailed as Jongnam's greatest sword, truly lived up to the title, or was merely another fraudulent name in a world full of pretenders. Jongnam sighed, feeling the weight of his duty. There wasn't a teacher alive who could bear to watch their student spiral out of control, and despite the absurdity of the situation, he still clung to that role. But this would be the final warning. He told himself that the next moment would decide everything. No more tolerance, no more leniency. And with that, the real battle ignited. Neither held back anymore. Guchon relished every moment, taunting his opponent mid-combat, chastising him for dropping his guard and losing focus. Jongnam, for his part, found himself reluctantly impressed. For someone Guchon's age to reach this level of skill, it wasn't by chance. Blood, sweat, countless secret hours of training, it was evident in every move the boy made. It unsettled Jongnam, yet stirred a sense of admiration. While their blades clashed and fists flew, Jongnam caught himself grinning like a fool, unable to suppress the thrill of facing such an opponent after so long. It had been years since anyone forced him to this edge, and now, as Gu Cheon mocked and challenged him, Jongnam felt his fighting spirit surge, his hands itching to draw out techniques long buried. Guchin's mind briefly wandered, recalling the cult leader's nagging over the years, begging him to fix his bad habits. The old man had insisted Guchin's tendencies would bring misfortune, but Guchin, as always, let the words pass through one ear and out the other. He had his ways, and they worked. And now, it was time to unveil the true might of Jongnam's famed 36 Swords of the World. Jongnam was taken aback. The name alone made his chest tighten. How many times was this kid going to shock him? The surge of nostalgia and anticipation mingled in his veins. It had been so long since he felt this exhilaration, this spark. Unbeknownst to both, a messenger crow silently observed the battle from a nearby perch, taking in every detail before swiftly disappearing into the horizon, carrying news of the rooftop duel. The intensity of their fight escalated, neither willing to concede, both combatants locked in a fierce, unrelenting struggle. But just as the air around them seemed ready to crack under the weight of their ki, a chilling presence cut through the battlefield like a dagger through silk. The shadow assassin had arrived. Jongnam's blood ran cold. Fear gripped his heart as he instinctively recoiled. That presence, unmistakable, suffocating, sapped the strength from his limbs. The infamous Shadow Master stood before them. Gu Cheon, sensing the shift in atmosphere, scowled in annoyance. What now? Another pest had appeared. This rooftop, meant for a simple exchange of blows, had turned into a gathering ground for monsters. And now, with the Shadow Master's arrival, everything would spiral further into chaos. The tense confrontation on the rooftop took a sharp turn when a figure clad in black suddenly appeared between Guchun and Yeongnam, halting their relentless duel. It was the Shadow Assassin. The mere presence of this figure was enough to make Yeongnam's face pale and his breath catch in his throat. He stared in disbelief as realization dawned on him. Guchun, however, showed no sign of restraint or fear. Instead, his annoyance seemed to grow, scowling at the unexpected interference. Yeongnam managed to mutter out his shock. How could it be? Guchun? A shadow assassin? But Guchun was having none of it, gritting his teeth and snapping back, demanding the assassin to back off, irritation radiating from him like a storm cloud. The assassin's gaze was unwavering as he made his intent clear. Guchun had violated the sacred rules of the martial alliance by recklessly displaying martial arts in a civilian space, and for that, punishment was inevitable. Guchun sneered at the accusation, mocking the so-called sanctity of martial artists in this world. The idea that martial artists had somehow become holy protectors was, to him, utterly laughable. The assassin's anger spiked at Guchun's shameless attitude, condemning his use of martial arts on civilians. Guchun, with a casual flick of his hand, pointed directly at Yeongnam and asked mockingly what part of him looked like a civilian. As for the martial arts he supposedly used, Guchun scoffed, claiming that weak, half-hearted display could barely be called martial arts in the first place. The assassin, growing more furious, explained the importance of martial arts discipline and the role of shadow assassins, those tasked with maintaining the order of Murim, protecting civilians, and restraining those who would abuse their power. They were the hidden blade and the shield of the martial world. Yet Guchun, utterly unimpressed, cursed under his breath, declaring his contempt for people like the assassin who clung to a self-righteous sense of justice. He vowed to smash that so-called justice to pieces. Sensing the situation spiraling into disaster, Yeongnam hurriedly stepped between them, arms spread wide in a desperate attempt to calm the storm. He tried reasoning with the assassin, claiming that what happened barely qualified as martial arts, and that the alliance should be the one to judge. He pleaded for leniency, promising that he would personally ensure no repeat offense would occur. The assassin remained cold and resolute, unwilling to abandon his duty. But Yeongnam persisted, appealing to the assassin's sense of fairness, suggesting fate itself might have led the assassin here for a reason. The assassin, momentarily silent, accused Yeongnam of still clinging to outdated superstitions, and yet, despite himself, the assassin hesitated. After a tense pause, he slowly sheathed his sword. Yeongnam sighed in overwhelming relief, thanking the assassin profusely. Gucheon, meanwhile, grumbled in the background, biting down on Yeongnam's hand as if to free himself from the situation. Yeongnam didn't flinch, the exhaustion from the ordeal weighing heavier than the sharpness of Gucheon's teeth. The assassin gave a final warning, stating there would be no forgiveness next time, and vanished into the shadows as quickly as he had arrived. Left alone, Yeongnam finally collapsed onto the ground, worn out, while Gucheon glared at him. Yeongnam managed to mumble that they needed to talk, and the two of them sat down on the rooftop, shoulder to shoulder. Gucheon still fuming, Yeongnam still trying to catch his breath. Gucheon began to process the rules of this bizarre world, so apparently, using martial arts freely was prohibited. He questioned why people would go so far as to restrain his abilities, feeling the weight of rules he didn't ask for pressing down on him. Yeongnam, for what felt like the 100th time, tried to explain that the times had changed. Survival wasn't determined by brute strength alone anymore. Gucheon, clearly frustrated, called it nonsense and accused Yeongnam of being out of his mind. The back and forth continued until Yeongnam finally gave up, declaring himself done with the conversation. Gucheon sighed, silently admitting to himself that he truly had landed in a strange place. Still, one question lingered in his mind. If martial artists existed here, did that mean the demonic cult existed too? The thought ignited a fresh sense of urgency in him. He immediately turned to Yeongnam to ask, but the man was already standing up. Yeongnam explained in his usual exhausted tone that while Gucheon could probably skip out on class, he himself was a teacher and had responsibilities. Gucheon shouted after him in frustration, unable to believe Yeongnam could prioritize teaching over what felt like a world-ending issue. Yeongnam simply shrugged it off, promising they'd talk after class and making it clear that, while it may seem insignificant to Gucheon, his duty mattered. With that, Yeongnam left, leaving Gucheon to fume alone. He yelled after him, cursing his luck and wondering aloud what he was supposed to do now. Frustrated beyond measure, Gucheon lay down on the rooftop, staring at the sky, trying to make sense of the day's insanity. Jongnam, meanwhile, sighed heavily as he made his way back to the classroom, his head spinning from everything that had happened. He wasn't even halfway through processing it all when, far off in the distance, something unusual appeared. A strange presence Gucheon hadn't felt since that morning stirred in the air nearby. A shadow loomed again. Something, or someone, was coming. In the bustling classroom, a low hum of restless chatter filled the air. The students, though itching with curiosity, exchanged wary glances, wordlessly reminding one another to mind their own business. None dared get too involved. If anyone got caught up in whatever mess was brewing, they knew they'd be in trouble too. Everyone valued their own safety, a little too much to risk it. Gucheon, meanwhile, slumped against his desk, groaning internally. His boredom gnawed at him like a restless itch he couldn't scratch. This so-called special mission he was meant to complete could only be cleared after fulfilling some prerequisite mission, and it was driving him insane. His face wore the perfect expression of a man utterly defeated by tedium. Jongnam, watching from the front of the room, raised an eyebrow as his gaze landed on Gucheon. The young man was sprawled over his desk, mouth hanging open as he slept, a thread of saliva dangling embarrassingly from his lips onto the tabletop. Jongnam sighed heavily, shaking his head at the absurd sight. He muttered to himself, wondering how on earth this was the same reckless idiot who had almost gotten hauled off by a shadow assassin just this morning. The class carried on around them as Gucheon stirred from his restless nap. A faint groan escaped him as he slowly sat up, wiping his mouth, his head feeling a little clearer than before. He began piecing together everything that had happened since his arrival in this strange place. It all felt increasingly bizarre. He recalled how, the moment he had declared his real name out loud, his words had vanished into thin air as though swallowed by the world itself. His cult leader had always warned him, "Don't act recklessly, you trickster." It dawned on Gucheon now that there were rules to this place, invisible threads binding him, forbidding even his identity. Jongnam's voice broke his train of thought, calling out to him sharply, but Gucheon barely registered it. Clutching his head, he toppled from his chair, whining in pain. The knock to his head earlier that day left it pounding, a relentless throb splitting through his skull. He groaned, muttering about his bad memory, trying to deflect Jongnam's interrogation. Jongnam peered down at him, baffled. He asked if it was true that Gucheon's forgetfulness stemmed from a blow to the head, and the younger man just waved it off, treating it like some trial straight out of a martial arts comic. The kind of ridiculous, over-the-top scenario any scrappy protagonist would face. Jongnam, sighing with exasperation, relented. As a teacher, he reasoned, he couldn't ignore his student's struggle, even if the student in question was a colossal pain. Seizing the opportunity, Gucheon casually steered the conversation in a dangerous direction. He asked about the demonic cult, pretending it was just out of idle curiosity. Jongnam stiffened, surprised by the question. He admitted that, as far as anyone knew, the demonic cult had been destroyed a long time ago, though he couldn't be entirely sure of what still lurked in the shadows of the world. Before the conversation could go any further, a girl approached, addressing Jongnam. She was cheerful, with a polite bow, and Gucheon squinted, trying to place her. The girl Kim Minjung from Class 3 reminded him of the nurse's office for some reason. She asked if Jongnam was heading home with Gyojin, and Gucheon's stomach twisted at the name, still not entirely used to this false identity. Jongnam brushed them off, saying his goodbyes for the day. Gucheon blinked in confusion as Minjung casually announced she was going home too, to their home. It stopped him cold. He gawked at her. Since when did they live together? Minjung just laughed, telling him they'd been living together for over 3 years. Gucheon scratched his head, flustered but playing along. Apparently, it had really been that long. The promise of a good meal perked him up. Minjung mentioned her father was cooking something delicious for dinner, and the thought alone had Gucheon drooling. He realized he'd barely eaten all day and figured he'd worry about everything else later. First, food. As they made their way home, Gucheon's instincts flared. He sensed something. Minjung, oblivious, chatted beside him. He asked her where she was going, to which she answered with innocent confusion. Home, obviously. Without warning, Gucheon grabbed her by the wrist and broke into a run. Minjung yelped, confused, asking if he was that hungry, promising not to steal his food, but something was off. The streets around them darkened with a sinister air. Glancing over his shoulder, he picked up on the presence of several shady figures trailing them. Before long, they were cornered in a narrow alley, surrounded by a group of thugs. The men sneered, confirming amongst themselves that this was indeed the boy they'd been tailing. One remarked on Gucheon's decent judgment in running, though his luck clearly hadn't held. But in the split second it took for one of them to blink, Gucheon was gone. Minjong, suddenly drowsy, slumped to the ground, inexplicably asleep. One of the thugs scoffed, assuming Guchun had ditched his friend to save his own skin. They spread out to hunt him down, but Guchun hadn't run. He materialized behind them like a shadow, his eyes cold and sharp. He struck, his blow so powerful it sent one of the thugs crashing to the ground. The man's head bounced against the wall, unconscious before he hit the dirt. Guchun cracked his knuckles, a crooked grin stretching across his face. Run away? From the likes of you? The remaining thugs glared at him, enraged. One spat on the ground, brandishing a weapon. Another snarled, asking if Guchun had a death wish. They closed in, but Guchun, undeterred, welcomed the fight with a twisted smile. As dusk settled over the narrow streets, Minjong called out in frustration, her voice sharp and laced with concern. "Yojin! Aigu, you fool!" she scolded, hurrying after him. He had, once again, forgotten the way to their own house, a path they'd traveled together countless times. She sighed heavily, waving him over. "Come on, let's hurry and go," she added, exasperated. Guchun watched her with a mixture of irritation and wary calculation. This girl, really, he thought to himself. Perhaps, he mused, it would be best to put her to sleep for a little while. It would make things simpler, especially given what was about to come. He sighed, already pondering what excuse he'd have to come up with later. Tsk. What should I say later? Elsewhere, in a darkened alley nearby, Mahong cursed under his breath, seething with anger. That son of a bitch disappeared, huh? His voice was thick with frustration as his eyes darted around, trying to catch a glimpse of Guchun, but Guchun was already in position. Without warning, Guchun's voice came from above. "Above!" he called out, catching Mahong and his men off guard. Confusion flickered across Mahong's face. "Above?" he muttered, instinctively tilting his head upward. And there he was. Before Mahong could react, Guchun descended from his perch like a predator, his expression fierce. The bullies below barely had time to register the situation before Guchun struck, his movements sharp and precise. "How dare you tail me? Weren't you even prepared for something this simple?" he snarled. The gang of thugs hesitated. One of them, his face pale, stammered, "Look, let's retreat first. We aren't at a level where we can handle—" "What?" Mahong barked, incredulous. "You want to retreat because of one damn brat like that?" But the thug's instinct screamed otherwise. "That's not it. Something's not right. My instinct, it's telling me this is dangerous." "Shut up, you bastard!" Mahong snapped, furious. "Getting scared by a punk like that? Are you an idiot?" Another member, attempting to steady the situation, spoke towards his teammate. "Towards a teammate, I told you not to speak carelessly." But it was clear unease was spreading among them. "Are you okay?" one asked another, seeing his comrade grimace in pain. "I just let my guard down for a moment," came the weak reply. Guchun scoffed, a mocking grin playing on his lips. "Let your guard down? You aren't an idiot? That's rich," he mocked. Mahong gritted his teeth, fury burning in his gaze. "You bastard! Everyone, draw your weapons and assume combat stance." But Guchun remained unimpressed. "Back in my day," he muttered with a sardonic grin, "if you spouted that kind of low-level bullshit about letting your guard down, you'd already be dead, you son of a bitch. Got it?" The words stung. One of the bullies, visibly rattled, muttered, "Advice I've never even heard from our team leader, to hear it from a mere brat like that. This guy, truly arrogant and insolent." But Mahong wasn't finished. His face twisted into a snarl. "It's not just because of your tongue that you'll die here. It's not solely your tongue's fault. I'll kill you in a single stroke, without pain." Guchun laughed, derision clear in his tone. "Bullshit. The bastard who'll soon be crushed on the floor is bluffing." He raised a hand, daring them. "Go ahead and try me, if you've got the confidence." But in truth, his own body wasn't cooperating. A cold sweat broke across his back. "My body won't move. This body's weaker than I thought. Damn it!" He'd hoped they'd back off after he took one down, but now it was clear. These guys were no ordinary punks. Are these bastards martial artists too? Panic began to edge into his thoughts. "Hey, monster bastard!" Guchun screamed inwardly. "Looks like I'm gonna die, so come out already. You must want something too, since you called me here. Come at me, you bastard!" One of the gang members eyed him closely, sensing something amiss. "You, right now, seem to have some kind of problem?" Guchun cursed silently. Fuck, look how perceptive that bastard is." Outwardly, he forced a mocking grin. "What are you talking about? Empty carts are usually the loudest." But the bully wasn't buying it. If it's not that, why are you so suddenly on edge? Guchan's frustration built. Damn it, hurry up and come out, monster bastard. Seizing the opportunity, one of the gang members lunged. His reaction slowed down. Now! We must not kill him, but push him to the brink of death. Guchan's patience snapped. I don't care anymore, he growled under his breath. Whether this bastard's body explodes or not, I gave you a chance. Wait a minute, Mahong! One of the bullies cried out, sensing something bad about to happen. Too late, you bastard, Guchan whispered darkly. What had begun as a bluff was no longer pretend. Suddenly, Mahong let out a blood-curdling scream. Kua! Fuck! My arm! Blood sprayed across the alley as his arm was severed cleanly. Guchan stood over him, unflinching. Always! Bastards only come to their senses after seeing blood, he spat. Mahong writhed on the ground, cursing violently. Kick! Fuck! Fuck! Guchan crouched down, sneering. Hey! Take your arm with you! Mahong's eyes blazed with hatred. You! You bastard! I will definitely kill you! Guchan shook his head mockingly. Huh? You shouldn't have lost your arm. I should have pulled out that filthy silver tongue of yours. He knew full well what price he'd just paid for drawing on momentary strength through pressure points. Since I forcefully drew temporary power using acupressure points, this body will probably shatter into pieces soon. Not even sure it'll last through one more move. Maybe not even a single moment of respite. He exhaled, resigning himself to it. Well, since it's come to this, it's do or die. I won't be lonely on my way out. I should make you bastards my travel companions. His voice dropped low, his intent clear. Let's go see our cult leader. Together. Somewhere nearby, a new group arrived, sensing the chaos. Is everyone okay? A voice called out. A subordinate panicked, yelled, Team leader! We need to request backup. It's dangerous. What? Request back you? The team leader began, but before he could finish, something heavy struck down. Team leader! The subordinate screamed, horror etched into his voice. Guchan turned, his grin feral. What are you now, you son of a bitch? He spat into the gathering darkness. Jongmu High School appeared ordinary from the outside, just like any typical school. However, among martial artists, it was known as a special institution that primarily nurtured the rising talents from prestigious families. This was no ordinary school. It was a place where the elite trained and competed. I, coming from a nameless and insignificant family, was fortunate enough to be selected as a scholarship student and granted entry. Despite being a Murim school, a place dedicated to martial arts, the nature of power within these walls had changed with the times. Where once strength meant martial skill and chivalry, today, true power was measured by authority and political influence. It only took me half a day to realize my powerless position in this world. To the others, I was an outsider, someone who didn't belong anywhere. Survival in such a harsh environment meant staying quiet and invisible, almost like being dead. I spent my days carefully observing those around me, learning to read their moods and intentions. Maybe because of this, my intuition and perceptiveness developed far better than most. I endured the hardships quietly, and finally graduation day arrived. Through sheer hard work and persistence, I managed to get accepted into a reputable university. On that very day, something unexpected happened. I was approached and asked if I was Yusun. This moment marked my first encounter with the team leader. The team he led was not some prestigious group. It was a unit that dealt with the dirty and dangerous work, handling matters most others wouldn't touch. I was placed in the weakest team, Team 7. Some might wonder why, after all I had endured, I would agree to such a fate. The truth was simple. As the eldest daughter in a ruined family, my only goal was to revive what was lost. But more realistically, it was because this work paid well. For someone like me who had nothing to offer, this opportunity was a rare stroke of luck. I had spent my life scavenging through refuse bins just to survive. Maybe if I became a little better, things wouldn't change much, but at least I could try to ensure my younger siblings wouldn't suffer the same fate. The reality was harsh. The jobs assigned to Team 7 were menial and dangerous odd jobs, far from anything grand. The threat of death felt almost absurd in the face of such tasks. But then, this person, this team leader, was something different. Unlike the others, he seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. He spoke directly to me, his tone calm but intense. He said I seemed different from the rest, that I knew how to read the situation. For me, he offered two choices. The first was to run away immediately and never look back, promising that if I fled, I would survive while he would slaughter the others. The second was to kill him then and there, which would save everyone else. I was stunned, unsure of what to make of his words or what to do. He pressed me for an answer, emphasizing the urgency. Time was running out. His gaze felt like a heavy weight, looking down on me from above, challenging me. The pressure was suffocating. I struggled to find a way out, stalling for time in the hope that other members of the Ambu team might arrive. But he dismissed that hope, saying reinforcements would change nothing. Despite this overwhelming presence, I tried to think clearly. I struggled to calm my racing mind, repeating "think" over and over, desperately searching for a solution. In a sudden burst of clarity, I declared a third option, something I hadn't even considered. The team leader was surprised, asking where this third choice came from, but I insisted it existed. I reasoned that my earlier state of fear meant there was a problem, some obstacle I hadn't yet solved. The leader acknowledged my insight, but then showed disdain for the pills I carried, medicinal pills meant to boost internal energy, distributed monthly to the team. He sneered, calling them low-grade and useless as even side dishes for his meal. Despite being known as an unparalleled master, he dismissed the idea that these pills could help me overcome my problem. I pleaded, desperate, to be allowed to use any method to survive, circulation of internal energy or any other means available. Even though I recognized the futility of my words, I vowed to do whatever was necessary for my younger siblings. I could not afford to run away and abandon them. Instead, I resolved to face the danger head-on, displaying bravery even if it was reckless. Suddenly, the leader remembered something. He mentioned a number 5, a new option I hadn't yet realized. With a mix of frustration and amusement, he congratulated me and told me to take care of the younger ones and return home safely. His tone was casual, but the sincerity was clear. It didn't feel like a lie. Without further hesitation, he prepared to leave. Before he went, he warned me that if I dared to tail him carelessly again, I would truly die next time. I thanked him, overwhelmed that I had survived this encounter. But now, I was left wondering, what was I supposed to do next? Where did I go from here? The world around me felt uncertain, but somehow, I had gained a glimpse of a way forward. The night was quiet, and the setting felt almost ordinary, but beneath that calm, an undercurrent of tension stirred. Gyojin arrived home much later than expected. His parent, waiting impatiently, immediately scolded him for his tardiness. Gyojin quickly explained that he had been at night self-study, a punishment he had no choice but to endure. Despite the frustration, his parent had prepared a special meal, braised short ribs, as a reward for his hard work. The warmth of the home momentarily softened the evening's tension as excitement and gratitude filled the air. The delicious meal awaited, and Gyojin was urged to come and eat. But before he could join the family, Gyojin's attention was drawn elsewhere. He was covered in grime and dirt, a mess his parent quickly pointed out must be cleaned before it stained his clothes. The laundry room was the immediate destination for him to wash up. There was a familiarity to this kind of mess. It was something that always happened to Gyojin, much to the chagrin of his family. As Gyojin hurried to clean himself, the scene shifted drastically. The atmosphere grew strange and unsettling. The place that was supposed to be a bathhouse was far from ordinary. Within its walls, there was something unusual, something surreal. A man looked upon his reflection, or rather a distorted version of himself. He was no longer the person he once was. The name Guchin no longer fit him. His body, scrawny and weak, seemed foreign to him. He reflected bitterly on the expectations of masculinity, how a true man should rigorously train his body. The warm water of the bathhouse was a luxury, a comfort he remembered from the past when followers had to boil water over a cauldron to prepare for their baths. As he soaked and contemplated, a sudden intrusion shattered the moment. Someone burst in unannounced, startling everyone present. Panic erupted. There were accusations, cries of alarm, and desperate pleas for someone to close their eyes to avoid witnessing whatever was happening. The intruder was suspected to be a thief, but the real threat seemed far more sinister. The mention of a demonic cult lingered in the air, a notion met with skepticism and fear. Someone threatened that whoever was responsible for sending him back would face a painful and violent end. Confusion and chaos gave way to urgent news. The legendary Lord Darmo himself had summoned all shadow agents in charge of various districts. This was no ordinary call. It was an urgent summons demanding immediate attention. The shadow agents, scattered across their posts, prepared to converge, understanding the gravity of the situation. The excitement among some was palpable, eager for the rare gathering after such a long time. It almost felt like a scene out of an action movie. The chatter quieted as the meeting commenced. The connection to Lord Darmo was established, and though there were minor technical difficulties, the communication was clear. The presence of the Lord was both reassuring and commanding. His demeanor was unexpectedly gentle, even a bit shy, but there was no mistaking the seriousness in his tone as he addressed the assembled agents. He began with small talk, asking after their well-being, before quickly moving to the core issue. It was a matter requiring investigation, something not minor, but certainly urgent. Traces of demonic arts had been discovered within Korea. This revelation sent a ripple of shock and alarm through those listening. The implications were significant. Demonic arts were forbidden, dangerous, and often tied to chaos and destruction. This discovery meant the shadow agents would have to act swiftly and decisively. As the agents absorbed the gravity of the situation, they prepared for what was sure to be a challenging and perilous mission. The night had brought with it not only the usual struggles of daily life, but the awakening of a darker force that threatened the delicate balance they sought to protect. The morning began with a quiet urgency as the team prepared for the day ahead. There was talk that team leader John was heading to the 15th floor, a detail noted with a mix of routine and slight concern. An undercurrent of tension rippled through the ranks as news of an unfortunate accident during a recent mission reached the ears of those in command. The incident had occurred while recovering a corpse that Team 2 had handed over the day before. During this recovery operation, the team was unexpectedly discovered by a shadow agent, sparking a fierce confrontation. The battle was brutal. Members of Team 7, Mahong, Yuseon, Seongju, and Jonghun, found themselves engaged in a desperate fight. The consequences were severe. Seongju suffered injuries requiring 11 weeks of recovery, Jonghun faced an even longer convalescence of 13 weeks, and Mahong's injury was devastating, his arm severed in the chaos. The damage was so extensive that these members were now considered incapable of continuing their duties. Despite the severity, the response from higher-ups was dishearteningly pragmatic. It was clear that internal company regulations frowned upon sending team members on missions without their leader present, no matter how trivial the task. Team 7's leader had only arrived after the fact, a fact that did not sit well with those responsible for oversight. Yet, to avoid unnecessary scrutiny or complications, the incident was to be reported simply as a fall accident. The intention was to let the matter pass quietly, without attracting undue attention. This attitude reflected the grim reality faced by many within the Shadow Unit. They were seen as disposable, merely parts to be replaced when worn or broken. The grunts were expendable from the factory's perspective, and such disregard weighed heavily on those who served. Amidst this, a question arose regarding the failure to use the gold lock formation during the corpse disposal. This formation was a fundamental safety protocol for all Shadow Unit members when handling sensitive tasks. It involved creating a space separated from reality itself, usually established through talismans and mystical tools wielded by lower-level operatives. Handling such matters without this protective measure was deemed unthinkable, a serious breach of protocol. The inquiry was met with feigned curiosity and dismissive answers, though the unease was palpable. Team 7's leader appeared flustered, trying to mask deeper concerns. The pressures of leadership were mounting, and there was talk about the limitations of remaining in the same position indefinitely. The team leader's salary was barely sufficient to cover personal expenses, including children's education abroad, a burden shared quietly among peers. There was a candid, if harsh, discussion about the necessity of moving up the ranks, especially for those without prestigious backgrounds. Some claimed lineage and connections gave them an edge, contrasting with others who struggled to climb despite their dedication. Suddenly, the situation escalated. The scene shifted to chaos as backup was urgently requested. The medical team was called in immediately to assist the injured. Mahong, gravely wounded, was in critical condition, and desperate efforts were made to stabilize the team. The team leader confronted the harsh reality of the aftermath, overwhelmed but determined. In a quiet moment of reflection, the leader urged silence about Park Jong-nam's disciple. The importance of discretion was paramount. This was a matter that could not be allowed to escalate publicly. The leader's faith in the disciple's intuition, the very reason for scouting him, had been shaken by the recent events, and the weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon him. Despite the injuries, the team members were still alive, a small but crucial relief. Immediate plans were made to take them to a trusted healer for urgent treatment. Questions about the incident were met with silence from Yuseon, deepening the mystery of what had truly transpired. The leader admitted fault for sending the team without proper support and for underestimating the threat posed by Park Jong-nam's disciple. Though it was late in the day, the leader offered a quiet birthday wish, a fragile attempt to find hope amid the despair. In the end, the leader clung to a simple, stubborn belief. It was better to survive, even if it meant enduring hardship and humiliation. There was hope in survival, and in that hope lay the faintest glimmer of a future. The day began with an unexpected curiosity as someone noticed a sudden spike in a certain figure that had been much lower the previous day. The puzzlement lingered. Why had this number risen so drastically in such a short span? The thoughts circled repeatedly, unanswered. Gyajin had finally returned home after a long day, and a concerned voice asked if he had made it back safely the night before. There was frustration too. Why had he taken so long? Calls had been made repeatedly, but there had been no answer. Gyajin explained he had come immediately after class ended, brushing off the delay, yet there was an unspoken tension. Someone suspected Gyajin might have gotten into some kind of trouble again. The accusation was met with nervous laughter, a denial that failed to convince. The uneasy atmosphere deepened when questions arose about the presence of assassins in the area. Of course, such deadly figures existed here. They were dealt with by certain operatives known as the Amyongsa, or shadows, those who operated like government soldiers. Similar to the police in some respects, but far more covert and lethal. Curiosity piqued, there was a pressing question about where to find these assassins. The sudden interest in this dangerous subject raised alarms. Someone sensed that Gyajin might have been followed by one of these deadly agents. Did something happen to him? Was he in danger? The questions piled up rapidly. Despite the tension, it was nearly impossible for anyone with a keen martial arts sense not to detect the presence of assassins unless their skills had reached the pinnacle of the demonic arts, allowing them to completely hide their presence. Even then, the possibility of failing to sense such a threat was slim to none. Just as a warning was issued not to follow someone, a sudden interruption occurred. The identity of a newcomer was questioned in alarm. These were not the same assailants from the previous day, but their presence was no less troubling. Panic rose sharply as the situation deteriorated. Urgent messages were sent, pleas for contact made to a team leader who remained unreachable. There was frustration at the inability to connect via text. Calls were demanded instead. Amongst the chaos, exasperated complaints surfaced about the situation and the old-fashioned attitudes of some in command. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to a lighter moment where siblings greeted each other warmly. The older sister returned home early, bringing a friend who arrived bearing snacks. The children had saved some for her, proud of their small accomplishment. Encouragement followed for the children to go out and enjoy ice cream, with a reminder to look after the younger siblings. But even amid these innocent moments, danger lurked. An ominous presence approached, their fighting spirit dark and threatening. Panic set in as the realization dawned that the Dark Division might have already sent someone in response to the previous day's events. The fear of exposure and retaliation mounted. The Gold Chain Array, a powerful mystical barrier, had been activated without the usual protective talismans or martial tools nearby, indicating a direct activation. This meant no one could leave or enter the area without dispelling the array, an act only the responsible leader could perform. Then, an unexpected visitor introduced himself formally, Seo Juho, the leader of Team 3 in Yeongnam's Dark Division. His presence was both a surprise and a warning. He expressed a desire to discuss the previous day's incident, particularly focusing on the grievous injury sustained by his younger sibling. According to official documents, this sibling had lost an arm and suffered mental trauma in what was reported as a falling accident, though the truth was far more complicated. The revelation hit hard. Disbelief gave way to anguish and tears as the harsh reality of the injury settled in. The Amyongsa did not hold back, and questions about the events of that day pressed urgently. Before more could be said, a voice cried out in desperation, signaling that the search was over. Someone had been found after a frantic and exhaustive search. The atmosphere was tense and charged, with the command to come along delivered with an unmistakable sense of urgency. The unfolding situation promised more revelations and confrontations ahead. The journey had finally reached its destination. The place they arrived at was cloaked in an eerie quietness, a location that bore the weight of secrecy and danger. One of them requested to be put down, exhaustion evident in their voice after being carried for some time. A subtle yet formidable barrier surrounded the place, the 8 Gates Golden Lock Formation. This was not just any defensive measure, it was a rare and powerful technique, almost legendary in its complexity and strength. The very mention of the Golden Lock Formation stirred surprise and disbelief. It was almost unimaginable for someone to detect its presence, let alone enter it. Only a peerless master could even sense such a formation's subtle energies. It was known as one of the key reasons why Damro, an operative from the Dark Shadow Agency, had yet to fully understand or infiltrate the Dark Division's domain. Skepticism turned to astonishment when it became apparent that a young person had not only found the formation, but was on the verge of destroying its barrier. Such a feat was unheard of and signaled the extraordinary skill or luck of this individual. Whispers of distrust and cynicism filled the air, with the old adage echoed, "Those who pretend to be clean often harbor the deepest filth behind the scenes." Amidst this tense atmosphere, a decision was made to proceed deeper into the forbidden area, despite warnings that the place was about to close soon. Arguments to turn back were quickly dismissed. Time was running out, and there was a pressing need to confront the situation at hand. Suddenly, a figure of authority appeared, commanding attention and respect. Panic and confusion rippled through those present as questions flew about how the intruders had even managed to reach such a protected place. It was a daunting question, and the tension was palpable. An order to move forward was issued, accompanied by sharp exchanges. One companion struggled with an injured leg, whining briefly, only to be brusquely told to stop complaining. The injury was not life-threatening. The group advanced, with suspicion cast on how they had bypassed the Golden Lock formation. Had they been inside it all along? The possibility seemed slim, but the evidence suggested otherwise. As they walked faster through the confined space, one of the newcomers acted with a rough, defiant demeanor, muttering under their breath. The tension between the group members was thick, and identities and intentions were questioned. Freedom seemed within reach for one of them, who declared their arrival with a mix of relief and defiance. Yet even in this precarious moment, demands for courtesy were made, a reminder that despite the chaos, respect and protocol held importance. The confrontation grew serious as questions were raised about the events of the previous day, specifically what had happened to a younger sibling who had been gravely injured. The team leader of Team 3 expressed deep regret and shame over receiving false information. The assault on Team 7 had been severe, with an unknown masked attacker putting the entire team in jeopardy. Despite the leader's apologies and attempts at explanation, the weight of the failure was evident. Recollection of harsh lessons learned on the first day of the job came to mind. Always stay vigilant, trust no one, not even your own team members. Lying, if one must do it, should be done with control and without nervous trembling. Suspicion hung heavily in the air, with a sudden realization that the threat was not from the expected sources. Amid this charged moment, a spirit of respect was noted for the resolute determination of one individual. Questions about identity and overwhelming presence arose, revealing the arrival of someone powerful and formidable. The tension was abruptly interrupted by a recognition of another mistake. A distraction by a rough character had allowed an unseen figure to approach unnoticed. A firm vow was remembered. Never get involved with Murim again, never glance in that direction, no matter the circumstances. The moment of truth arrived when the person who had broken through the Golden Lock formation was finally revealed. Recognition and exasperation mingled in the voices that named him Park Jong-nam, the former strongest sword of the region. His reputation preceded him, and with it came a mixture of frustration and grudging respect. With a sigh, old habits were acknowledged as hard to break. Jong-nam was borrowing what he needed, stepping into the fray with the weight of his past and the inevitability of confrontation. The harsh words exchanged revealed the long history and unresolved tensions between the characters, words sharp as blades, calling him a little son of a bitch, a reflection of the complex relationships and grudges carried by those who lived within this dangerous world. The stage was set for a clash of wills and skills, a reckoning born from secrets, betrayals, and the relentless pursuit of power within the shadowed corridors of the Dark Division. The tension in the air was palpable as hearts raced with the weight of the moment. Jong-nam, once hailed as the best sword, had seemingly fallen from grace. The realization stirred disbelief and concern among those witnessing the unfolding events. One companion checked on another, asking if they were all right, though the response was dismissive. Anyone paying attention would notice the uneven, labored breathing betraying underlying worry. Despite no longer holding the title of the best sword, Jong-nam remained confident in his abilities. He hadn't forgotten the art of wielding his blade, though the battle suggested that his prowess was being challenged. The movements were deceptively fluid, smooth and flowing, but not invincible. It was a tactic designed to lull opponents into a false sense of security, inviting them to lower their guard. Jong-nam's control over the speed of his sword was a calculated deception, a mark of his mastery. The situation quickly escalated in complexity. The intention was to subdue, not to kill, yet the threat of a fatal blow loomed. The question hung in the air. Had he actually finished his opponent? The tension sharpened when a cryptic phrase was uttered. Night Blossom False Art. In an instant, the user vanished, like a flower blooming under the cover of night, deceptive and elusive. This technique was perilous, even for a swordsman of Jong-nam's caliber. Amidst this chaos, a question was asked abruptly, seeking the whereabouts of their captain. The query seemed to startle those present, but was met with evasive responses and uneasy silence. Confusion swirled. Was the best sword currently incapacitated? Despite the tumult, A figure advised ignoring him, displaying a cynical dismissal. It was unsettling to witness such brusqueness directed at one's own master. The conversation shifted briefly to a moment of care. Someone was supposedly tending to the best sword's injuries, though denial quickly followed when questioned about this. The certainty that the best sword would not lose to such a challenger sparked intrigue. The explanation came in the form of the 4 principles of swordsmanship: slow, heavy, swift, and illusion. Each principle represented a different approach: Dong, dominating space with deliberate slowness; Jung, adding weight and strength to every swing; Guai, emphasizing speed and directness; and Huan, focusing on illusion, deception, and feints. Mastering even one of these principles was enough to make a swordsman formidable. For someone bearing the title of best sword, failure to master any was unthinkable, a mark of disgrace. Focus was urged toward the one explaining these principles, suggesting that their knowledge and skill might be the key to turning the tide. Further discussion revealed the hierarchy of their teams. For a low-ranking ANBU member, knowledge was scarce, limited to the orders passed down by team leaders. The team leader of ANBU Team 3 was identified as holding a higher rank and potentially having more information about the captain's whereabouts, more than the team leader of Team 7. This revelation caused frustration, as the information had been withheld until now. The sudden appearance of a figure who seemed to know more about the complex power dynamics further complicated matters. The escape of the injured swordsman was acknowledged, though it was clear his body was failing under the strain. Despite injuries and diminished status, Yeongnam's pride burned fiercely. Losing to a younger opponent would be an unforgivable disgrace. Suddenly, the scene shifted again. The elusive swordsman disappeared, leaving those present questioning his identity. An unexpected attack or movement caught them off guard. The urgency escalated with references to the value of time, suggesting swift and decisive action. A warning to rest and recover was met with disbelief and frustration. In the midst of this frenetic exchange, a sudden pause came with a simple request for information, an attempt to gather clarity amid confusion and mounting danger. The story, filled with shifting allegiances, cryptic tactics, and the relentless pursuit of mastery, was far from over. Tensions ran high in the midst of a chaotic confrontation. Accusations flew as one individual was confronted for attacking someone who was supposedly a teammate. Confusion quickly turned into outrage, voices raised in disbelief and anger, calling each other crazy and insulting one another fiercely. Yet amidst the hostility, a grim reality emerged. Despite the bitterness and conflict, they had indeed come together, though the question of whether they truly functioned as teammates remained uncertain. One figure, weak and trembling, admitted that they only began feeling somewhat better after taking all the pills given to them by another. This revelation shocked their companion, who questioned if all the medicine had really been consumed at once. The response was blunt, dismissing the pills as barely sufficient, almost like a side dish rather than a proper cure. The tension rose as the injured person let out a painful groan, the physical and emotional strain apparent. The focus shifted abruptly to a pressing matter: the whereabouts of the assassins, or rather, the ANBU's leader. The injured party was reluctant to cooperate at first, pulling their hand away with irritation and complaining about the increasingly aggravating tone of their interlocutor. Even as a question about a nearby person arose, the injured one refused to bow down to what they called trash, making it clear they didn't know the person well. Meanwhile, concerns grew as efforts to reach the team leader proved futile. Checking the area revealed that the team leader's weapon and activity uniform were still in place, yet they were nowhere to be found. Alarm bells rang, prompting a hasty report to be sent upstairs, urgently requesting backup as a vague but unsettling sense of danger took hold. Amid the growing unease, a new figure stepped forward, recognizing the talent of their opponent, but dismissing them as an inexperienced greenhorn, someone lacking real combat experience. With fierce determination, this challenger declared a merging of self and sword, a mind-sword unity, to test whether the opponent had truly reached the peak realm of skill or was merely full of empty bravado. The battle erupted with an incredible aura radiating from the challenger, their fighting spirit unlike anything seen before. An intense invitation was made to test strength and skill, warning that regret would come too late once the fight began. Blood splattered, a testament to the brutal and merciless nature of the combatant, who thrived on the carnage. The challenger offered a high-stakes proposition. If the opponent could withstand their attack and defeat them, they would reveal the answers sought. But the opponent, undeterred, demanded the information immediately. The challenger scorned such naivety, predicting a certain death for their adversary and warning against complaints after being defeated. The fight intensified, with the challenger preparing to unleash the true essence of their technique. The Art of the Nightflower. The opponent reacted with shock and confusion as the challenger called out the name of their form art, declaring victory even before the clash fully unfolded. The sword shattered unexpectedly, and a mysterious, dark energy emerged, an attack described as a black void injury, a strike of pure darkness without substance, but with deadly effect. The opponent struggled to comprehend what they had witnessed, their shock deepening as the damage inflicted seemed surprisingly minor given the dramatic display. The challenger revealed they had held back, leaving the opponent uncertain and coughing from the force of the encounter. Suddenly, a new threat emerged, threatening the life of someone named Han Si-kyung, who was doomed to die after another figure named Sul-si passed. The challenger pressed the advantage, intent on silencing their opponent, who instead preferred to let shadows fall rather than fall victim to deceitful tricks. Amid the chaos, the golden chain formation, a protective or binding technique, began to break, causing confusion and fear among those witnessing it. Questions arose about the true identity of these fighters and the ominous aura that surrounded them. One seriously injured person lamented their condition, aware that others could clearly see what had transpired. The narrative closed with a bitter declaration from a survivor who, despite having been saved by another, framed themselves as a mere victim, nearly slain by a madman. The anger and disbelief culminated in a fierce exclamation, cursing the one who had caused such turmoil and pain. The atmosphere remained thick with tension, danger, and unresolved conflict as the story unfolded further. The aftermath of the violent encounter left one man bitterly proclaiming that he was merely a victim who had nearly died at the hands of a madman. His harsh words hung heavy in the air as another figure erupted in anger, cursing the presence of the man who had caused so much chaos. The tension escalated as an authoritative voice thundered, demanding to know the intentions of those gathered, reprimanding them for disturbing the rules and order of the Murim alliance. The reckless use of martial arts was not to be tolerated. Despite the warnings, a dismissive retort cut through the tension, mocking any preaching about holiness or order as a waste of time and panel space. The enforcer threatened that everyone present would be arrested and judged by the alliance, a declaration that sent waves of unease rippling through the group. The prospect of being taken to the alliance stirred panic in some, leading to frantic protests about unjust treatment. Defiance surfaced as one person outright refused to comply, challenging what anyone could do to force them. The atmosphere thickened with hostility, voices rising as a brute admonished another to read the room and warned that this time, unlike before, things would be different. The verbal sparring was cut short as the question was posed. What exactly did they think they could do against such overwhelming force? An imposing presence made itself known, radiating a pressure so overwhelming it silenced doubts and intimidated those nearby. The consequences were clear. A criminal refusing to obey orders would face the wrath of a shadow agent. Fear settled in as the reality of the situation became apparent to all but the most foolish. Then, a name broke through the tension: Lord Damro. The very mention of this name elicited awe and astonishment. Lord Damro himself had arrived, defying expectations since he was believed to be in China. His return was sudden, and he found the unfolding events had been prepared as a surprise for him, an impressive display of power and disorder. With calm authority, Lord Damro commanded compliance, urging them to follow quietly for the sake of their master, or more specifically, for Park Jong-nam. The mention of this name sparked whispers and recognition. Park Jong-nam was known as the #1 swordsman, his face etched in the minds of many. Despite the gravity of the situation, Lord Damro set a strict limit on cooperation, only for 1 hour, no more. His willingness to cooperate was grudging, but resolute. The story behind the chaos was soon revealed. The old man, presumably Lord Damro, had been captured by someone called Jojin, a name that sounded savage and brutal. He insisted on his victimhood, recounting how close he had come to death. The incredulity of an adult man being overpowered by a student was noted, but the truth was clear. He had been attacked not just by an assassin, but by the Shadow Division itself. The victim protested, explaining that their master, Park Jong-nam, had repeatedly warned against reckless martial arts use, yet despite the warnings, attempts were made on their master's life. As disciples, they could not simply sit back and watch. The pain and betrayal were raw. Others listened skeptically but acknowledged the fainting and injuries were real. The situation was too serious to ignore, even prompting one to consider whether the Shadow Division might be involved in a demonic cult conspiracy. The idea unsettled them, especially as the victim's steady breathing suggested authenticity. In the midst of this, the awareness of mutual surveillance in this space came to light, an almost eerie recognition that their eyes had met, suggesting this was no coincidence. The victim was caught peeking, unable to hide their curiosity and anxiety. A wave of recent surrenders hinted at growing instability within the ranks, and rumors of personal revenge against the Jongnam sect surfaced. Questions arose about why someone who had abandoned everything was now attempting to re-enter the martial world. The old man urged rationality, advising against emotional reactions and urging cold, logical judgment. He lamented not having conveyed this to them earlier at Yongnam. Apparently, the sect had assigned the Shadow Division to keep watch on him and his disciple, which led to the current violent confrontation. Lord Damro explained that this entire situation had emerged during a pursuit of certain targets. Since the Shadow Envoys were part of the Alliance, a thorough investigation into the conflict between the Southeast Operations Department and the Shadow Division was imperative. Suddenly, the urgency escalated as news arrived that a demonic cult student was rampaging while holding someone named Hoyoung hostage. The mere mention of this brought forth shock and anger. This brat was notorious, and the situation was rapidly deteriorating. Lord Damro admonished those involved to control their emotions and stay calm in order to properly assess the unfolding crisis. But the chaos and outbursts persisted, as a young figure defiantly told someone to get lost, ignoring earlier warnings that the time limit for cooperation had expired. In the midst of this frenzy, confusion swirled as the situation was reiterated and questioned, underscoring the gravity and complexity of the moment. The stage was set for a critical turning point, with alliances tested and the fate of many hanging precariously in the balance. To be continued, we'll cover the next story very soon. Stay tuned. If you like the story, let me know in the comments.